All right. Good morning, everybody. We've still got people joining. I'm going to invite Kelly to the video screen too, and Steph's going to pin us to the top so that you guys get to see us, at least for the first part here. I'm going to stop sharing that slide. All right. We're ready to rock and roll. Good morning. So you guys are all muted, everybody on the line, and we'd appreciate you staying that way. We're going to leave plenty of time for questions, and you can always chat as we're going. As you can see, we're recording this. So if you do ask questions, if you do come on video, please be aware that you are being recorded, and we will be sharing this out, primarily with the people who joined or who couldn't make it, but just wanted to make sure everybody is aware of that. Steph, can you go ahead and pin Kelly and I to get started? Perfect. Thank you so much. Well, for those of you who know me and who have been to any of our other events, I typically create events that I want to have the conversation and learn from, and then I just invite everybody else to come and be part of it. So this is absolutely one of these. It's something Kelly and I have been talking about. Well, her and I have been having conversations like this for a very long time. And it was just finally like, we need to bring our real conversations, vulnerable, authentic, and we need to bring it to other people. And so, Kelly, I appreciate you being here. As I've said in many of the posts about this, there's no one I trust more than you to have this conversation and to be real, right, with everyone and really try to help us soften the edges of our judgment, examine our beliefs, like all of the things that we're going to do in under an hour here this morning. So I appreciate you being here and being part of this. So today we're talking about creativity, inclusivity, and belonging. And I'm sure as we go, we're going to go into other aspects as well. But the reason Kelly's here is because she's been an advisor for me, just navigating, the last how many years being a parent. How do I become a better leader in our community and in my business? And she's been such a sounding board for me. And she's also the CEO of Brand Lab. And so I'm going to let her talk about Brand Lab because it's an amazing organization that is truly it is having an impact in this space. So Kelly, I would love for you to just start with just talking a little bit about Brand Lab and your background, just so people get a sense for who you are.
Thank you, Jamie. And thank you for inviting me to have this conversation. We have been having similar conversations for such a long time. And I think it's important for many reasons, including the fact that the conversation never ends, right? The journey that we're all on to learn and continue to grow is something that we need to continue to be on and continue to learn and to grow from each other. And so I'm excited to be here and to share my perspectives with you and with everyone that's joining us today. I'm excited to share about the Brand Lab. I'm the new CEO. I have been a member of the Brand Lab in many different ways for about a decade. I've volunteered with the organization. I've been a coach. I've been a mentor. I've been a strategic advisor and recently stepped into the CEO role. The Brand Lab is a nonprofit organization focused on changing the face and the voice of the marketing and advertising industry. And when I say face and voice, what I really mean is, and we'll get further into this, the idea of changing the face. So inviting additional people into organizations to diversify the organization. And the voice is also saying, we want to embrace who you are and we want to hear from you. So we're focused on doing both, bringing diversity into the industry that I love. I'm a 20-year marketer. And so bringing diversity into the marketing industry, but also embracing unique perspectives, backgrounds, and voices, and asking and allowing them to be heard.
And that's what I love. And that's exactly my first question for you on this is this idea of inclusivity, right? Belonging. There's a lot of words, DE&I, and what I sense, and this is even myself in the journey that you've helped me be on, is like leaders don't necessarily understand what that means, right? It feels still very surface level. And so I want you to share, because you've just shared some really quick definitions that have hit me, right? Like right squarely here. And I'm like, that's how you explain it. So what does that mean to you? Inclusivity and belonging, if we're doing it right, what does it look like?
Yeah. So I love this quote. I will also share my perspective, but I have to share this quote by Liz Boslin. She says, diversity is having a seat at the table. So diversity is there's more people at the table, right? Inclusivity is having a voice. And then belonging, the last piece, belonging, is having that voice be heard. So diversity is being at the table, inclusivity is having a voice, and belonging is being heard. So my personal definition is diversity is allowing others to be somewhere, right? It's maybe inviting me and my Black family to your party. Inclusivity is inviting us to be there and then being glad we're actually there instead of being like, oh, it feels a little bit awkward and uncomfortable. The last piece, belonging, is embracing the presence of different individuals, different backgrounds, different perspectives, and supporting them so they can feel a sense of connection and they'll want to stay.
I love it. And you have a short, you said it to me, making it easy to show up as you are and not feeling othered. Right. And I think this other is an important term for us to kind of think about.
It's a really important term. So I'll give an example. I have, as I've mentioned, I've been in the marketing and advertising industry for about 20 years. I have always been the only, often the only minority, always the only Black person or biracial person. And as I've worked my way up, I have often also been the only woman in leadership. So I would call myself a double other. And it's always been a challenge. It's always been the question of, okay, I'm here. So from a diversity perspective, they're checking their box, but is that what they want from me? Is it just the ability to say we have one diverse individual? Or are they also allowing me to have a voice? Are they listening to me? And are they actually processing what I say? Right. And so examples in my career of times in which I would have a perspective, I would have an idea as a leader in the organization, and it would be glossed over. A peer who doesn't look like me, who maybe doesn't have the same background or experience than me, could say the same thing and have someone listen to them. And so that's the difference in my perspective between diversity and then that inclusivity and creating a sense of belonging for people who are not of the dominant culture, people who are other.
And so the interesting thing about this, again, this is the conversation you and I have been having for years and years and years, but what I love about your approach, and especially with Brand Lab and what you're trying to do, is that we're trying to call people into this conversation instead of call them out. And that's what makes people nervous, is we have to feel like I'm nervous about having this conversation, and it doesn't need to be that way, because all we're doing is saying, let's just figure out how we can get better. And I, the years of diversity being the focus was the first step. And I think people thought that's when we were done. And then it became, but our customers look different than we do, right? Than our makeup of our board, of our leadership team. How are we making sure our customers, right? Or we're serving them in the right way. And so it's gone beyond that. But there are so many other examples. So talk about mediocre mom, because you and I talked about this, and I think there's going to be a lot of people on here that can relate to this in terms of what we're talking about.
Absolutely. So I love the concept, and we talk a lot about the idea of calling people in instead of calling people out, right?
Okay, I don't know if it's Kelly or if it's me. Can someone tell me if you can still hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you, Jamie.
Okay. Uh-oh. No. Okay, Kelly, if you can hear us, you are frozen on our side. So hopefully she can figure that out. Well, I will, let me share a couple of stories. So I was planning to share in this space as well. So in this discussion, I've started to use a term to talk to leaders about reference man. And if any of you, and you can Google it right now, if any of you are in the medical field or you've ever been in the medical field and you understand, reference man was created in medical terms and is still used as the person that they really focus the dosages of medicine, right? So they say it's a male, this age, this weight and height, and then they'll say, okay, so from there, that's our reference point. And then if it's a female and they're less weight, then we give them this dose. And if it's a male or female and they're this weight, we give them this dose. And so this reference man is something used in the medical community to make sure that we're dispensing drugs at the right dosage and all of that kind of thing. What has started to happen is you've started to see examples where that reference man no longer represents what is actually in society. And I'll share a really harsh example is self-driving cars. So there's been examples of the way it was coded was for a white male of a certain height, right? Literally the cars have to recognize there's a person there. And they were having instances in the testing where it was not recognizing people of color because the reference point that they had built the software around wasn't diverse, right? It didn't represent the actual world that car was going to see. And so you're starting to see a lot of talk around, first off, is that reference man even the right, is it set right, for where society is at today? And when I learned that, I thought, that's what we're talking about at a very simple level is anytime you are a standard deviation or more away from reference man, society kind of looks at it as like, that's not normal because normal should be this. And I think what we've all experienced is that normal is evolving, right? Normal looks very different now than it did before. Welcome back, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm not sure what happened.
Not as wisdom-filled information, but yeah. So
I love the reference man example, and I love the reference man example as it relates to just starting from the name itself, reference man, not inclusive of different genders, and then taking into consideration all the different diversity in ethnicity and racial diversity that comes into play there as well. I reference that back in my own mind as a marketer to what we see on television and what we see in the media. And from very, very young ages, even more so now with my children, going back to being a mediocre mom, my kids get way too much screen time and they get way too much exposure to what the media puts out from an advertising perspective, but also in television shows. And that reference point of what good looks like that is shown on screens. The reference point of what size we should be, what ethnicity we should be, what our hair should look like, what we should be eating. We have all of the influencers. I have a daughter who will be 12 on Sunday, and she seems much more like a teenager because of all the influencers, right? She's spending way too much time seeing the influencers, and she has this perspective of how she should be, how she should show up in the world, how she should talk. How she should be annoyed with me because that's how other girls are on social media. And this reference point is so important. And we as leaders are responsible for what we put out into the world, right? Even if you're not in marketing, if what you're putting out isn't on the television, isn't on screens, what we put out within the organization, how we cast vision for what good looks like, what our reference point is of our expectations within the organization. So back to that idea of calling individuals in instead of calling them out, calling the entire organization in to embracing diversity, embracing varied perspectives, experiences, backgrounds, not only accepting, but I'm specifically saying embracing.
Well, and I want to share a personal story. I know we're recording this and my daughter's never going to listen to it anyway, so we're fine. But I just had this experience 2 weeks ago in Target with my daughter. So my daughter is 17 and she has heterochromia. And what that means is she's got a dark brown eye and a hazel eye. Since she was born, she has 2 different color eyes. I have always worried, right? Like kids are tough, kids are mean, right? She made it through middle school, she's made it through high school, but I've always waited for the moment where she's like, I'm different. Can I get a contact? Like, I just was like, I know it's going to happen at some point because it's extreme, right? And you can see it when you look at her. It's beautiful. But we were in Target the other day and I don't even know how it came up. And I said, does it ever bother you? Like, does anyone ever say, because she's never brought it up. And she's like, no, she's like, I think it's really cool. And then she said, Mom, look around. And it was the first time I'd looked around. And so kudos to Target. I don't know if there's any, and other brands I think are getting there, but we were near the beauty and it was these big posters, right? Where they have the faces. and it was like people with gaps in their teeth, and it was people with complete freckles, right? No makeup covering all their freckles and all. And she said, like, it's cool to be different now. I think it's, she was like schooling me. I'm like, your generation, it wasn't, but like, it is cool now. So while we talk about how much work we have to do, I do think, and at least for our kids' generation, they're starting to see that they're starting to force it. That things are getting maybe a little bit better, but there's still so much work to do.
I agree. I think Target does a fantastic job that way, and other brands do as well. I'm actively watching on LinkedIn the Dove campaign around hair, right? One of the things I was taught very early in my career was you will get further if you don't stand out. So instead of standing out, assimilate, put a mask on, cover who you are the best that you can, because I can't change the fact that I'm biracial and I'm very clearly a darker complexion, but never wear your hair curly. Never wear your hair in a ponytail because you'll look too young or naive. Right. Stop bringing in baked goods because people will think of you as a mom. Skirts and dresses really aren't acceptable in the workplace, especially if you want to be in leadership, because you need to assimilate to your male colleagues.
Right.
These ideas are ideas that I'm so glad to see evolving in my generation even. Yeah. And those are simple places to start. The continued evolution is what I'm really on fire to see. Yeah. The radical change, the radical acceptance of unique perspectives, ideas, backgrounds, diversity.
And the benefit it can have, right? We're culture people here. So like the benefit it can have for culture. And I think the thing that we also need to get past is this isn't something we should do. It's actually something that will benefit our businesses. And I think that's our next, if we have to cross a chasm, it's that chasm. Mm-hmm. It's not the should and guilt feeling of doing it or figuring it out and coming to a conversation like this. It's what could it benefit? So we talk about creating a culture of contribution versus fit a lot with our clients. And when even in the hiring, like asking a question like, how do you think you could contribute to our culture? To me is inclusivity and belonging. It's letting them bring their history, their experience, and saying, I might be able to make us better instead of just fit into what you already have. And so how do you see that play out in the work you do, right? Because that's what you're doing is helping organizations create that culture that's more of a contribution.
Absolutely. I love that. The word culture fit is like nails on a chalkboard for me. The reality is culture fit is looking for and embracing additional people that have shared experiences, the people that potentially we feel more comfortable with. I truly believe in culture augmentation. And I love the word augmentation because it really is about adding to. And what I talk about with culture augmentation is the idea of really taking inventory of what you have, taking inventory of the perspectives, backgrounds, skill sets, even personalities that you have within a given department or within an organization as a whole, and looking to augment that, looking to bring in unique diversity into what you already have. And when I'm talking about that, I'm talking, yes, about ethnic and diversity from that perspective, but I'm also talking about it from personality, work style, experiences, really the whole excuse me, the whole person, and allowing that whole person to come to work.
And we talk with our clients a lot about that. I had this conversation on Monday where we were talking about a tough topic that needed to be communicated out. And of course, the person they thought needed to communicate it was the person at the top. And as we were talking through with the leadership team, I stopped him and I said, one of the leaders, right? Somebody that wouldn't normally send this out. I said, I think he understands it. And just based on his role, they probably would have more empathy for the change and understand. And they were kind of like, oh, that's a really good point. His experience changes how the message is received, right? Versus everything having to come from the same seat, right? And it's read differently when it comes from different. So, I mean, that's just a simple example of really paying attention to who's communicating.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And the authenticity piece of that is the biggest piece, right? It's when I talk to individuals and they say, well, what can I do to be more inclusive, to create an environment where people can feel a sense of belonging? And I talk about start by encouraging them to show up as their whole self, encourage them to show up authentically as them. And don't just say it, encourage them in words, but encourage them in actions. Encourage them in how you support them and the vision that you cast in your team, in your organization, for unique perspectives, unique backgrounds and experiences to be seen and heard. I
So
think that's a key piece.
I have a super vulnerable story to share here. So Christmas, right? In the office, we've got all our Christmas decorations and we get everything set up. And this year I have a member of my team who's Jewish. It never occurred to me that I should decorate until like 2 weeks before Christmas. And I was like, oh my, like, what am I doing? So I came in over a weekend and put up simple, right? I don't know a lot about it, but I'm like, I put up some decorations over the weekend. So when everyone came in on Monday, there was some semblance of, right, celebrating. And I can't even tell you how much it meant to me to see the impact it had on that person, that small effort. But I was clueless and there was no malintent. And so this is what I think happens. And I share this because I think a lot of us are just like, we know what we know and we don't seek out knowing other things. We're on autopilot every day, right? Just doing what we have to do to get done. And we don't actually try to find those places to learn more about a different holiday, a different religion, a different ethnicity. Like we just live our lives. And I think that's the piece we have to figure out, is how to get curious again about humans and their different experiences.
Correct. And I think, part of it is being courageous to even recognize that there's a hard thing to do. It's a hard journey, right? At the Brand Lab, we do a lot of DEI and B workshops, and we call them our fearless workshops. I love the term from a branding perspective. As a marketer, I love the idea of being fearless. However, I don't think it's about being courageous. It's about being fearless. I truly think it's being courageous and courageously having those uncomfortable conversations. Courageously saying, I screwed up, and then moving into action. Not only being like, oh shoot, I should have remembered that there are other holidays, right? But instead taking action and embracing and learning, and even sitting down and telling your team, wow, I screwed up here. And I looked to make it better. And I'm so interested to learn more. I would love to learn more about your culture. I would love to learn more about the holiday. I would love to truly embrace and support you further. That's where we go from the idea of inclusivity into the sense of belonging.
Right. Great comments in the chat if everybody's watching that. Thank you guys for that. Okay, so I want to share a few stats with you that didn't surprise me, but I think they may surprise some people. We do a lot of work in this space. Is 48% of Gen Z are racial or ethnic minorities. Yeah. So think about this, right? So this is what you're hearing. And again, when you're hearing it in the media, it's very dramatic. It's, but 48% of our children right now, they identify as ethnic or racial minorities. That change is happening whether we decide to embrace it or not, as companies, as marketers, as leaders. And so I think that's a really important stat for everybody to understand, that we have to figure this out in order to be able to function as society, given the change that is happening just in the numbers. And then diverse companies enjoy 2.5 times higher cash flow per employee. And diverse management has been shown to increase revenue by 19%. So 5, 7, 10 years ago, we didn't have these studies, right? We now have the data. And I know you're shaking your head because you have probably reams of data from the Brand Lab of like what the impact is if we really not just start talking about it, but we start incorporating it and have it actually be part of who we are, not just something we think we should do.
Correct. Yes. I love these stats. I think these are really important, powerful, and meaningful stats. I think the reality is there's and you said this before, there's we should do this work because it's the right thing to do. we also should do this work because it makes business sense.
Yes.
And as organizations, as we continue to evolve as a society, organizations are going to need to evolve as well. When I think about the fact that over or almost 50% of the Gen Z population is diverse from a racial or ethnic perspective, and then I think about the industry that I love, the industry that I have spent my career in, right? And I think about the fact that in Minnesota, in the Twin Cities specifically, it's the industry is like almost 80% white. So the industry that I love, that I've spent 20 years of my career in my city, is almost 80% white. And when I think about the BIPOC individuals in the Twin Cities, so same universe,
Yeah.
and say, okay, so 36% of the Twin Cities is not white. Why is such a small percentage in the industry that I love? And you could take and replicate this with other industries as well. And I think the answer goes back to that idea of inclusivity and belonging. Even if we can bring additional diversity into industries, if we don't create organizations that call individuals in, that embrace individuals from unique backgrounds and experiences, so that they can feel a sense of belonging and want to stay,
Right.
they aren't going to stay.
And it goes back to your original, we talked about that feeling othered, is they have to feel like there's people that look like them, for them to first enter the room. And then hopefully, if we do the right things, right, that's the diversity piece. If we do the right things, it doesn't matter anymore because they feel included. They feel a sense of belonging in the culture, but it's not enough. But to get them in the room, sometimes that is the piece, right? They have to feel like there's going to be people that they can relate to there.
Yes. Mm-hmm. One of my board members, Taylor Harris, she's amazing. She came on one of our, into a conversation that we had as the Brand Lab recently. And she talked about a leader that she had in her career that on her first day told her, I want you to be here. We hired you because we want you to be here. All of you. Please come to work as yourself each and every day. And that leader didn't only say those words to her, but he then showed her that he really meant it in his actions, in the way in which he led the team that she was on, in the way in which he interacted with her. And going back to that idea of words mean something, it's a great place to start. But in this journey, in this continuum of evolution, actions speak louder than words,
100%.
right? And so what we stand for, what we put out in the vision that we cast within organizations, how we show up and the expectations we have is really important.
Right.
One of the examples I give my team when I think about, creativity, inclusivity, and belonging, I think that there's many different ways to get to the same answer. And so one of my favorite analogies is if I give a project, right, there's a what I'm looking to happen. And so if my project is, I want everyone on my team to make it to the Mall of America, right? So they have a what. The assignment is to make it to the Mall of America and they have to be there by 4. Okay. Mm-hmm. Someone may take a bike because they may be interested in riding a bike. Someone may drive a car. Someone might take an Uber or a train. The reality is, as a leader, I shouldn't be concerned with the how, right? Instead, the what, right? So the assignment is get to the Mall of America. The diverse, unique, creative solutions that they come up with may lead them on unique journeys where they gain more out of that experience than they would have if they did it the exact way that I would have. That to me is a great way of defining the creative, inclusive environment that I think we need to see in the workplace.
And I think this is, as I think about my corporate days and the term innovation, right, which now has just become a little bit of a buzzword, but this is the where innovation is going, right? Yeah. It's that healthy discussion and debate and unique perspectives in a solution, right? When you're trying to solve for something that comes up with something better than if we hadn't had, right, those healthy discussions and conflict and debate. And so that's what we talk to our clients about, especially in the Midwest. I mean, we all know it is we tend to shy away from those kind of really robust discussions. And that's where the best ideas and the best creativity come from. But in order to do that, our culture has to be strong enough to allow everyone's unique voice with our perspective that we bring into the world, because we can't change our background, where we grew up, like all of those things, but it all makes us richer in terms of a human. But a lot of times we don't pull any of those things out. I continue to be shocked by the number of leadership teams when we start with a client that don't know anything about each other, regardless of their diversity, or they literally maybe know, like they have 2 kids. They don't know where they grew up. They don't know anything about their background. Like, we're really just going through the motions.
Yeah.
And it's that deep cultural repercussions, I think, long-term, because there's no connectedness.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think that the idea of, to your point, of allowing everyone to have the conversation and getting comfortable being uncomfortable sometimes, because sometimes we have to have those uncomfortable conversations to grow together and to expand and prosper. And having unique perspective to have those courageous conversations is important. Having unique backgrounds, experiences. One of the key parts there, in my perspective, is that diversity. Having diverse backgrounds and experiences, and none of us should shy away from our backgrounds, our experiences, because it's not the new Gen Z way, right? Instead, it's embracing who we are, showing up as the best version of who we are, and embracing everyone else and encouraging them to do the same.
You're just making me think. I'm just sharing stories. Kelly's got all the wisdom. I'm just going to share stories. You made me think of another really pivotal point in my career. I was at Cargill. A lot of you guys know I worked at Cargill for 13 years. And I was part of our really big United Way campaign and a big leadership event that we were having. And I was running all the volunteer work that these leaders were going to do. And at the big the big dinner at the end of the night, they wanted me to come up and talk about, the volunteer piece and why it matters and all of this kind of stuff. And I was like 26 years old. And I was terrified. The CEO of Cargill was there at the time. Like, it was a room full of leaders that were way above me. And so I thought, well, I'm going to tell a story, right? And then it'll really impact them. And I told this story about a girl, right, who had been born to a single mom at 16, shopped for school clothes at the Salvation Army. I was trying to tie in, the United Ways. We never know who we know that might need these services. And at the end, I said, this girl is me. And there was everybody in the room. And I had people coming up to me afterwards, and they're like, I had no idea. And I'm like, no, it's okay. Like, I'm proud of it. Right. But in a corporate environment, it was so scary at first to share that with everybody, to say, my childhood was not what a lot of people in the Midwest think their child, right, that it would be.
Correct.
And I have a very different perspective. Even though I am a white woman, I still have a unique background. And it was just this whole different conversation. And this was how many years ago? But I just remember thinking, yes, that's the conversation they need to be having. And I wasn't even smart enough, right, to know that this is why. But I just thought, I shocked a lot of people that day, and that's good. They needed to change and think differently. And so, again, a simple example, but all of us have the opportunity to do that, to bring forward those unique things.
And I think when we put masks up and try to hide my mom was 16, or for me, my shocking story, right? People look at me today, and when I get up on stages, I always start with my story of, I became a mom at 17, and it defined me. It defined me and set the trajectory for the rest of my life. It taught me to run. It also taught me that I needed to put additional masks on, because I had no choice but to succeed. And the only way I knew how to succeed was to fit in.
Right.
And now, much further in my life, I'm slightly older than 17. I still feel like there are masks that I work to take off, right? There's still things that I'm so thankful for, the young people that I work with who show up so authentically as themselves, that I'm still hiding from. And I embrace that in them. And I work so hard to enable and embrace and empower their unique perspectives and backgrounds, as I'm trying to empower it in myself as a leader as well.
The
And I
worst
think
thing,
that that's
go ahead. The worst thing we can do in our organizations for our business results is to squash that.
mhm,
It's an actual,
correct.
the problem is we're not going to realize it's happening until, right? We're just not realizing the full potential
Correct.
of what we have in our
Correct.
organization.
Yeah. So get to know people, right? To your point of new engagements, learning new leadership teams that don't know each other, get to know people, not just what they do, but who they are. And it doesn't have to go all any further than anyone's comfortable with, but who are you? What is important to you? And
Yeah.
one of the questions that I ask individuals is, what brings you joy?
Right.
What brings you joy? Because that's the part I want to know. And as a leader, I think my job is to help individuals find more joy in the work that they're doing. I want to find that connective piece. So I'll tell a story.
Yeah.
As the leader of the brand lab, as I said, I've recently stepped into this role after being in marketing for a very long time and of being a huge supporter of the brand lab, but quite honestly, having no desire to sit in this seat long term. I stepped into the role on an interim capacity when their previous CEO stepped out. I had a very successful marketing strategy business where I often worked as a fractional CMO, and I loved what I did. I enjoyed having this interesting mix of unique clients that I got to work across industries, work with different teams, lead different teams. And then I also sit on a few different nonprofit boards and do volunteer work with organizations like the Brand Lab. However, when I sat in the seat for the first time as the interim CEO of the Brand Lab, what I knew almost immediately was that I had finally found my joy. I had finally found my purpose, my why. I truly believe that my purpose on this earth is to create opportunities for the next generation that comes behind me. I believe my purpose is to create opportunities for young girls so that those glass ceilings no longer exist, for young BIPOC individuals so that the walls are no longer up and the door is no longer closed. I believe my purpose is to crash down all of the biases and the prejudice and all of the limitations that are placed on people because of who they are at birth. And I think that I'm in the right place to do it today. And to me, that brings me joy each and every day.
I love it. And I remember the conversation when you decided to take it and you were just a different person. So I'm happy for you. I mean, this is what everybody strives for. And it reminds me of a workshop I did with one of our executive leadership teams on a personal why exercise. I did annual planning. I thought I'm going to throw this in, right? This will be great. They'll feel good. Construction company.
Yes.
All right. One female in the room, HR, right? But all males.
One other.
And they were uncomfortable to do this exercise to start. And then, it's these questions and, 4 of the guys are crying at the end of it. And they're like, I can't believe I'm crying. But they're like, no one's ever asked me these questions before. So the thing I want to say to the leaders in the room is until, put your own oxygen mask on first. We can't be good and do all the things Kelly and I are talking about in our organizations if we don't actually know who we are and what we stand for and how we can embrace our experience. And so I think it starts at the leaders in these organizations going deep and figuring out what really matters to them first. And then we're going to be able to have a lot better dialogue about how they can drive that in their organization. Because until they feel it and they feel the feeling you felt, I think it's going to be hard for them to realize they want everyone in their organization to feel that same thing.
Yes. I love that. I love that. And I love the fact that they vulnerably and courageously shared of themselves and did that self-evaluation. The reality is, I think part of the journey that we all need to be on, in addition to being courageous, is understanding in our courage, we may say the wrong thing. We may do the wrong thing. We may put our foot in our mouth. The question to ask at that point is, what do you do next?
Right.
To your example of only having Christmas decorations and then realizing it, what you did next was what defined that situation.
Correct.
The courage to recognize and continue on. As I've taken this role at the Brand Lab, we do a lot of DEI and B workshops, like I mentioned, and I've been spending time with the team, really going through and understanding and making some evolutions. One of the things that I realized when we got to workshop number like 5 of 7 was that the workshop was called Creative Blind Spots, which is an ableist term and not taking into consideration what we were really saying. And we were doing this workshop. We've done this workshop for many different organizations in the 3 markets that we serve. And it was very, very incorrect in our terminology and how we were approaching that. And we recognize that. And I share it because it's my way of saying we all make mistakes, even as an organization that prides itself on being DEI and D experts. We made a giant mistake for a very long time. We own that mistake and we talk about it freely because we want everyone to feel comfortable and to courageously try, know you're going to make a mistake, and then take action when you do.
Right. And I think that's the piece we all have to get over is we're never going to do this perfect. We're never going to say the right things. And this is why you're the right person. When I say I trust Kelly more than anybody to have this conversation is we can both share these like, hey, we've screwed up, right? Kind of stories, because I think it's the only way we normalize and we give people the courage to do something different. So to the leaders that are on here and listening, what are the new skill sets, mindsets, whatever it is that you want them to have, right? Especially in your work, because you see on the other side of the table, what are those new skill sets and mindsets?
Yeah, I definitely think the first one is to be curious. We all come from specific backgrounds and experiences, and some of them are more similar and some are less similar. So being curious of what we don't know, being curious of people's backgrounds and experiences, being curious of opportunities. To my example of the best way to get to the Mall of America, you don't need to have the answer, but being curious of how individuals would answer that question, being curious about anything that you don't know, being curious about, to your point, Jamie, the different holidays that aren't your holidays that you celebrate, but you know that they're holidays that you should embrace as other members of your team embrace them.
Right.
And then I think the next part is setting goals. Set goals for yourself. It's not a sprint. This is a journey, and I truly believe it's a lifelong journey. So set goals for yourself. Don't make this a sprint or something that feels too big or unobtainable. Set a goal as simple as learning something new or learning about something new or a new person once a week, once a month, whatever is realistic for you. Before I got cut off earlier, I was talking, you asked me the question about my mediocre mom.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So I define myself very freely as a mediocre mom. I'm the mom of 3 children. One of my children is 27, because again, I told you I had him at 17. So you can put the math together, and I'm a little older than I want to admit. My youngest is 8 and he's in elementary school. I have been on the PTO at my children's elementary school for, I think, something like 8 or 9 years. And it's a huge commitment. It's a huge commitment of time. And I also have been very active in my career and was building a business for several years. And there are times in which I just fall down. There are times in which my kids are 10 minutes late to soccer practice. There are times in which I just cannot make the PTO event. And that is the piece of reality that I have to embrace and to realize that I do the best I can, but I'm only mediocre. And the more I say yes to, the more I try to do, the more unrealistic goals that I set for myself, the more I'm going to fall down. So right sizing my own goals instead of measuring myself against someone else and their goals. I have this crazy idea that I should be on the PTO and I should be the PTO president and I should coach soccer and I should run
back
businesses
to the reference man, because that's
because
what
of my reference,
we're supposed
my
to
reference woman of my mother. So my mother did it all. She baked the cookies for the bake sales. She was on the PTO. She led my Girl Scout troop. She did it all. The reality is my mother was the super person. And I am so thankful for all that she did for me.
Mhm.
My mom also was a stay-at-home mom until I was in the third grade. I've never been a stay-at-home mom. And my reference point was off center
Right.
because I didn't put together the fact that we really weren't coming from the same experience and background.
Right. And that's a societal thing. I mean, I just keep coming back to this. Every time you feel mediocre in something, just realize it's because society is telling us we should look this way, we should act this way, we should say the right thing, we should, right, whatever that reference is that just feels safe, because it's not, there's no extremes in it from a societal standpoint. That's why we feel mediocre. It's not because we actually are.
Mm-hmm.
It's right. And so I think that's some of the stuff you're starting to see break down, and that's not what we're supposed to be anymore. And we've got to reassess our beliefs and our judgments and everything else around that.
Agreed. Which to me is going back to setting goals.
Right.
I think that the way to be successful is to set realistic goals. And so on this journey of understanding how you want to learn and grow and evolve and become more curious of cultures, backgrounds, experiences, perspectives that are different than your own, set realistic goals. Don't try to be the soccer mom, the PTO president, the bake sale person and lead an organization. Instead, try to do one thing. Set a goal to do one thing once a month, to learn and to grow and to be curious.
I spoke at
That
an
way you
event.
won't burn out.
I spoke at an event and a woman stood up at the end. They were asking questions and she said, I just realized, she goes, and it's setting a goal. She said, she was in construction, right? But construction on like the disability side. And she said, I don't fully understand life from their perspective. She said, I just realized it. And so she said, I'm going to join a nonprofit. I'm going to go seek out that perspective because it's going to make me better in my job. And it was just this realization. There's nothing, she wasn't bad because she hadn't done it before. It was just this realization of that's how I can get better and understand my customer better and be more successful in my career. But you have to seek it out. It's not going to just show up for you.
Correct. Mm-hmm. I think
Awesome.
that's amazing. And I also think it's important that she also what I didn't hear that she said was she was going to go ask one person to explain it to her so that she could figure it out. Right. She was going on her own journey and putting herself in those positions. And I think that's another key point as well of as we don't work to call people out, because even singling someone out and as the only in a marketing and advertising space for a very long time, I was asked to represent all Black people. We're going to put out this ad. Our target audience includes Black people. Kelly, what should we do? I can't speak for all Black people. Or this is, we're really trying to get with the diverse audience here. Kelly, what should we do? I can't speak for all BIPOC individuals. And
Right.
so that idea of truly understanding and being on a journey to learn and doing the work versus singling one person out, I think is amazing.
Yeah. So just I'll wrap up like with my last question, and then I want to open it up. We've got a little bit of time for if people have them, put them in the chat, or you can unmute and absolutely ask your question. The last one is just change. I want to talk about, right? This is all about change that we're talking about right now. And I think this really goes back to the work you're doing at the Brand Lab. And I want to make sure people understand the work you can do to help their organizations, because as we leave here, it's like, this was amazing. How do I explain it to everybody else at the office now? This thing I learned, and this thing we have to consider. So how can all of these evangelists that we just created on this call start to have these kind of conversations? And then how can the Brand Lab help too? I want to make sure people understand that.
Yeah, I love that. I definitely think just having conversation and being an active listener instead of listening to respond. Listen to learn and to grow and call other people into the conversation. I think that's step one. From a Brand Lab perspective, we do a lot of work and are focused on diversifying the industry that I love, the marketing and advertising industry, with young people as early as age 15, to expose them to the fact that there's even an industry out there for people who have creative thinking. That's the core of what we do. The other part of what we do is we work with organizations to ensure that they're ready to not only accept diverse people, into their organization, but to also embrace, enable, empower, and to listen to perspectives of diverse individuals. And we do that work through our fearless programming. So our fearless programming comes to life through workshops that we do within organizations. We also do workshops, virtually or in person. We do a monthly fearless conversation, very similar to this one, where we invite individuals from different backgrounds, experiences, industries to share their story and to talk about their life from an exposure, how they were exposed to the work that they do today, an opportunity, what opportunities came their way, or more importantly, what opportunities passed them by because of who they were and their backgrounds, the access points they had or didn't have, and then the equity. And as leaders, how they ensure equity comes to life in their organizations. So those are our fearless conversations. We also have a big annual conference. It's called our Fearless Conference. It's coming up May 4th. And I'm going to be honest, I'm the biggest nerd. And I picked the date solely because I want to say May the 4th be with you. So.
And we will be there. We are a happy sponsor of this conference. I'm really looking forward to being there. So that's a great place to bring somebody from your team to have a conversation, right? To bring them and say, let's do this, to continue to understand this.
Absolutely. And we are purposely bringing diverse backgrounds, experiences, ages to the stage to have it be not the traditional conference, but instead to hear from our youth panel, to hear from young people who have been a part of the Brand Lab programming and how it's impacted them and their career, and to hear from leaders within the three different locations we serve, the Twin Cities, Kansas City, and Milwaukee. And then we're bringing very high level C-suite keynote speakers to share their stories. The intention is community building, it's learning, it's for everyone to walk away with a new thing that they never knew, a new perspective, a new experience, a new idea. And it's also going to be a lot of fun. So that's our annual conference coming up on May the 4th be with you.
We'll make sure that we've got all the links for Brand Lab and the conference when we send everything out afterwards.
Thank you. And then I think the other way, the other thing to know about the Brand Lab and to know about Jamie and I is that we really care. And I think sometimes when we're trying to be courageous and we feel stuck in that, it's reaching out to someone who cares, someone who listens, an advisor, and just saying courageously, here's the situation. Maybe I put my foot in my mouth, and having that conversations that you can move from the situation and the mistake into action.
Yep. With no judgment.
And I'm here for it.
Yes, absolutely. Because it's the only way we get better. So I love that. It's a great message. So I want to open it up. If there's anybody on the call, you can unmute and you can just question, Kelly, are these fearless conversation workshops solely for marketing companies? Asking as an ED of an environmental organization.
They are not. No, we do fearless workshops with all organizations. We have what we call our core 4 fearless workshops that are really focused on bringing people together, calling people in. We, high level, our first workshop, it's called 3 Fearless Questions, and it's really focused on starting those courageous conversations with small groups. So breaking the team into small groups and really thinking about and aligning on words and word choices and some of the historical ramifications in the words that we have in society today. Then we go further into words and look deeper at microaggressions in what we call words matter, impact versus intent, the impact that our words have versus what we meant, the intent of what we said. The third workshop is about understanding and uncovering privilege. We all have privilege. I have been on a journey, a self-discovery journey, really, for the last, probably for about 45 years, but specifically in the last year. And I really uncovered the privilege that I have. And instead of feeling ashamed of my privilege, finding the right ways to use my privilege for good. And that's really what this workshop is about, is understanding our privilege. And then the last one is about moving from allyship to accomplice. And an example that I give of what that means is I'm on a board, and there was it's a very large board here locally, and there was a conversation happening on the board around a pretty important topic. And there are a handful of Black women on the board, and we were all very vocal on this topic. And it came up in 2 board meetings in a row. And in the second board meeting, a person who probably I would have thought was an ally asked for the microphone, and her statement was something more articulate than the way I'm going to say it, but it was something to the effect of, I have nothing else to add to this conversation, but I want to go on record of standing with and agreeing with everything that's been said by my Black female board counterparts. I think it's really important that we all stop and listen, because it's important. That was her moving from being an ally to being an accomplice, to being on that journey.
She's taking action. And it looks different. It doesn't have to be that big. And that's what we're teaching leaders. So what I love about the 4 workshops is that this is a culture thing, you guys. Like, if you're bringing this into your organization, we do culture work every day. It's building trust between leaders, because they now can have these kind of conversations. And I'm telling you, if they can have these kind of conversations, that customer issue that they need to have a conversation about is going to become a lot easier. So we have to help them build the muscle. And I think that's what the team at Brand Lab is doing, is like, let's go there in a safe place, right? Where people are not going to feel called out, but let's start to build this muscle so that we can have these conversations. So I love that. Any other questions on the call?
Sorry, I was just going to jump in real quick. Hi, Kelly, it's Kateri.
Hi, I'm so glad you're on.
So I asked a question about the workshops. I'm thrilled to hear that they are for all organizations. As just a little bit of, about what's happening with our organization is we are having more conversations and outreach to communities that are more diverse than what we've worked with historically. So that's Indigenous communities. We're working on Indigenous land. Obviously, all of it is Indigenous land, but specifically culturally significant areas. And we're working more locally in St. Paul with some really great communities. And so we're having some conversations directly with communities before we start developing the project to get input first. And as we're doing what I feel really proud of, I have recognized that for a lot of staff, and me as well, and I've been through a variety of trainings through different jobs, but in this sector, it feels like we're behind. I'll put that out there, the mainstream environmental organizations. So I realized, we are trying to do good work, but internally, we haven't equipped the team. And so I am very aware that we will keep putting our foot in our mouth if we don't slow down and make sure we have that internal conversation and education. So all to say thank you. We're working to get money for this, which is the piece that, you have to be a real advocate to say, if we say it's worth it, then let's put the money towards it. So thank you.
Wonderful.
No, thank you for sharing
that. Was really, it's a real life example in business, right? We don't walk in saying every day, people don't show up not wanting to do this kind of work. But if we don't have a place where we can safely learn and educate ourselves, that's what we're trying to create, is just create the space.
Agreed. And I think, back to when we talked about setting goals, I think anything we don't set a goal around and we aren't measuring, we aren't going to achieve. But I also think anything we don't put our money towards isn't a priority. And so that idea of, recognizing the need and then working to get the money to invest into your team is such an important step for organizations, for leaders to take on this journey. And so I love that you shared that. Thank you so much.
Yep. Any other last questions here before we wrap it up? So we are going to just feel free to pop in. We're going to make sure you have got contact information for myself and Kelly in the email that'll come out. We will make sure Brand Lab and the conference and all of that. So you can absolutely reach out to us or to Kelly if you've got other questions or want to have. We are always willing to have this kind of conversation. So
Always.
just so anybody knows, always. So just reach out. We want to be able to support, share this recording. We're going to send you the recording, share it, you know, with other people in your organization, if that's an easier way, right, for you to start to introduce this conversation, because that's what it starts with, is let's just have more conversations like this. So I appreciate you so much for taking the time to do this and being vulnerable with us. And I appreciate everybody who joined wanting to know more about this. I mean, this is leadership development, right? For all of you. So we appreciate you supporting and sharing this message as you go forth from this meeting today. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.